So hello again, and thank you for attending. Um, this is kind of a what I want to do when I grow up discussion. It won't be our first content involving astronomy or science. It's just kind of where we're going to go. It'll get a lot more formal, hopefully in the next week. And when it does, then you'll see some public announcements. But I just thought I'd kind of put out there some opinion and some ground rules. Okay, I've been doing this for some time, and I found that there is a thirst out there for science and technology education that goes well beyond what you might get in primary school or as a university student. People of all ages continue to want to learn about the universe that's around them, as well as continuing advancements in science, space exploration, and technology. Kind of along those lines, before I joined the session this evening, I was watching the latest SpaceX launch of 58 satellites for their Starlink system, plus another 2 commercial ride-along satellites to cover the cost of operation. So, I don't consider that people are incapable of learning. I assume they do have a thirst for information, and if their mind is open and they have access to the internet, they're probably going to learn a lot of things on their own. So I don't consider myself the sole expert on anything. Other people out there may have already done their homework and know more and can contribute. The difficult thing is getting the prerequisite baseline knowledge and the shared vocabulary on a subject, and that takes time. So I've spent a lot of time in my life doing that kind of thing, so I can absorb things quickly and condense them down. But people lead busy lives, and not everyone has the time to do this or knows where to start. So there is a need to create an independent means of satisfying this hunger for information. You can presume that there's some baseline knowledge that the presenter will have, and more attained as the need changes. But the idea is to package up the information, analyze it, and prepare it for people to consume it without a lot of the melodramatic falderall that seems to proliferate, let's say, the typical YouTube site, or formal sessions like TED Talks, where I think it's a little more about the speaker than the content. The other thing is to realize that this thirst for knowledge is not unique to Southeast Florida or the US. It is international in nature, regardless of what country you're in or even what language you speak. So we need something that realizes that reality and works with it, not avoids it or even shuns it. So educational participants take place at different places on the planet. And even if you set a prearranged time that is good for everyone, it is well beyond face-to-face learning. There's no physical contact. It is live remote learning, which I'm fine with that. And given that there are all sorts of geopolitical time zones, one person's awake time is another person's sleep time. So it's not always practical to do all the remote learning live. So sometimes we'll have to do it, if we get a speaker that is asleep when we would normally be awake and talking. It'll be a playback of a recorded interview session, and we'll have live commentary, and there'll be a group discussion that takes place beyond that and following any of the presentations. So when it's done properly, I think that remote learning can be extremely effective. If it's local, that's fine. If it's internationally live or pre-recorded and there's a group discussion afterwards, that's fine too. So we're going to take a different approach to learning. I think that once you get to a certain point in your awareness of what's going on around you, you get into a pattern of, okay, the speaker will speak, we'll all shut up, and then we'll get to ask questions. And if you've attended any of the sessions that I've hosted, you find that, hey, the mic is still on. If people are muted, it's because they choose to be muted. But I see a number of you are muted, and that's fine. The online session starts out with everyone muted, but you're free to unmute and ask questions as we go along. It might take a little longer to go with that approach, but I think it actually removes barriers that more formal approaches put in place. Like, I'm the speaker, thou shalt not talk while I'm talking. Like, okay, if you have something to say, it's much easier for you to remember if you say it when you think of it than say, put a pin in that and we'll get back to it sometime later. And also, if you bring up a topic that is, some might say, off topic, or a topic that is, we'll cover that later. I don't mind adjusting any agenda to cover it sooner rather than later. I've watched a lot of TED Talks, and it is a fairly popular motif, but the way that they stage them seems to be more about the exhibitionism of the presenter and how you should recognize the presence and value of that presenter, and they get them to maybe throw in a little humor there. And I think that stuff really stages things more than it focuses on the learning. And also, once you've done a TED Talk, there may not even be a Q&A session for anyone beyond the local audience, if there is one, and certainly no opportunity for any follow-up questions. We'll take a different tact on that. So I have watched more effective approaches to doing this. And what I found is that there are these things called discussion panels, where you have a moderator or facilitator that carries on an interview or a conversation with one or more speakers. And that seems to draw out more ad hoc communication of information, which is better. But then the better ones involve the audience, involve the participants. They get to ask questions of the panel and of the moderator, which stimulates more questions, which is even better. But even these lack a means of asking questions later, after things are done. But podcasts, video podcasts with interviews are very popular. They're kind of springing up out of the ether, so to speak, and they're very popular. And sometimes you can ask questions after the interview is over, or if you watch the recorded interview, sometime later, and then a question comes up. So we'll lean more towards that approach. So the idea is to make things informal, interactive conversations where everyone should be allowed to participate. There are no dumb questions. Everybody starts from zero when they're born, trying to learn everything, and they keep changing it as it goes along. So as I'm apt to say, this is neither rocket science, maybe, nor brain surgery. So we should be able to learn about this. And if everybody kind of moves forward and learns more about it and becomes confident, then all participants rise. So I was trying to identify what manner a business might take if it's to do this from a professional sense. And I started with the problems that the traditional approach has. So if you're used to amateur astronomy organizations that come out of a recreational interest, they're typically nonprofits, which is a means of reducing member costs, supposedly, although those prices are all over the map. But it typically is meant to avoid financial paperwork burden, and in particular, paying taxes on any revenue or donations. Nonprofits are rarely resellers, so they still pay taxes on any asset that they purchase. If they purchase services, the services are taxable too. So they're not really getting rid of any taxation or paperwork. except that associated with donations. The other thing is most of these organizations have a monthly or quarterly newsletter meant to package up and provide information of what's taken place since the last time it was published. And what I've discovered across many organizations, not just the one I was previously a part of, is that this creates a recurring burden, or a go get some information to stuff in the newsletter preparation burden. And you've got to find someone willing to take on this reliably on a recurring basis to act as editor. And that's, I think that was then and this is now. So once an organization grows and they have too many members for them to manage themselves, they often spend more money doing things like merchant services to handle their memberships. That's an added expense to the organization that, if you understand modern technology, isn't all that burdensome. They also operate typically with an elected governance, and some of them elect the leadership individually and directly, and some of them elect a board of directors, and you let the board choose who the actual leadership is going to be. This creates variability over time. And as engineers are apt to say, if it's working, don't mess with it. So I see popularity of leadership as a means of introducing variability in the system over time. If I've always tried to solicit feedback as, if we're not doing something that we should be doing, or if we're doing something that doesn't seem to be getting any traction, speak up, and we'll adjust things as appropriate. But being dinged by an administrative leadership that really just wants to throw a monkey wrench in things is not a way to progress. So we'll continue on from there. Another thing is that organizations typically have an operational anchor, be it an observatory or a planetarium or a university or just a building they have access to. And this, in the era of virtual learning, tends to create a burden. That burden is often operational, power, water, utility bills, phone bills, maintenance. If you're sort of subletting the facility or have a required burden of maintenance, that's a burden. And if all you've got to maintain is your Zoom session, that runs about $15 a month. So much less burden. And given that we're not doing things face to face, given the pandemic, you also have things like non-exclusive use, where you might have to share the facility. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't do that on Tuesdays because we're doing something else on Tuesdays with the building. You also have to endure things like maintenance by outside vendor contractors and lengthy remodelings. I took a look at Broward's Bueller Observatory, and it's still not back to full operation because they did a major remodeling that they didn't quite get the funding to finish. Also, being anchored to a public location constrains the audience to maybe just those that took the effort to drive by and take a look. I've been to a lot of observatories, and oh look, it's a building that has telescopes, nice telescopes. Okay, let me go talk to some people about what they actually do. So the discussion actually was more beneficial than was looking at the instruments. I can look at the instruments online. The other thing that having a fixed location sort of burdens with you is you're stuck with your local conditions. What's your light pollution like there? What's your cloud cover like there, especially during the summertime? And then the celestial positioning of objects. Hey, we'd like to show you Mars right now, but it's already set. But it's not already set somewhere else on the planet. So, open things up. If you can do things remotely, kind of like off-track betting at a racetrack. The rain prevented us from running the race today, so we're watching from off-track betting out of New York. Same kind of thing. The next thing is take a different approach to actually doing the business of this. So we're doing educational outreach, but instead of running it as a nonprofit where you have a board you must respond to, you have bylaws that dictate how you're to govern things, even though they have a lot of gray edges. I'm going to try operating this as a sole managing member, profit-based Florida limited liability corporation. That's a lot of legal gobbledygook, but it basically means if I like it, we try it. If I don't like it, we probably won't do it. Don't make and sell any products, but occasionally do offer some review and promote products for no commission. Sell only commercial observing, outreach, and educational sessions. So a lot of the stuff that I used to do kind of for free while I watched other groups doing similar things, just not involving telescopes, but getting sizable money from organizations and county and things like that. I think we'll touch more towards that direction. And offer a continuous flow of information, no recurring newsletter push-up to conquer every month or every quarter. Look at other groups as peers or establish affiliate relationships. Don't consider them competitors. There's no market posturing requirement that demands, ever-growing revenues and profits. And as long as we're covering our costs and we can reach out to people and are successful, that's fine. So a sole managing member provides stability for the purpose, what capabilities we offer, and the focus, what we're going to talk about. And also there are, I guess you could say, statements of principle that are filed with an LLC, but there's no formal bylaws that you're operating under Robert's Rules of Order kind of thing. So no opportunity for personality-based elections. Those not interested in this approach, if this isn't your cup of tea, you're free to seek alternatives. And if you attempt to perturb this one, then I will likely, mute and or bounce or not admit. So operationally, if you want to do this virtually worldwide, you also don't have the financial burden of an anchor location, which reduces costs. You affiliate with observing sites, institutions, and organizations around the world. And I've got a list further down to cover that. Create a comfortable environment for interactive learning that attracts repeat speakers. I am going to try and solicit people you might find interesting and see if they like this cup of tea, and we'll continue to do it. So here's the familiar part. This is kind of like speaking to the choir. Once we start the sessions, you'll see it has a familiar agenda to it. We'll start with topics in the news, which will shape the scope of the discussion, and also identify what the immediately participating audience is interested in or would also like to see. Solicit for additional current items, what might have been missed, and also start to solicit some inquiring minds out there. And then we'll follow with a prepared presentation on some topic. Maybe we picked it from a previous session. Maybe it's just, hey, look what I found this week. The sessions are open to Q&A at all times. There's no sort of half duplex of presenter talk followed by short, if any, Q&A session. And then following the presentation, we'll have a casual discussion of a variety of topics. It doesn't have to be on topic to the presentation. It can just be something you're interested in, something you thought of this week. And then here's the new addition. Provide an online discussion thread for later questions or follow-up. That's something that I found in other groups that I belong to as very beneficial, because sometimes you don't think of everything during the window of opportunity you have. Sometimes the thought comes up later, but there may be an answer for that. So, and to solicit the participants in a session for future topics and also future presenters. I know it's possible. I didn't start out being able to look into a camera and speak to people. It's something you have to get comfortable with. And, people aren't generally born or given their education not enamored with that approach, but it's something that can be grown, and you might find it actually enjoyable. I'm going to search for, if I need funding for guest speakers that are recognizable names and content. Being virtual implies there's no travel costs, so they should be less expensive. And if they have something they'd like to promote, maybe not a product, but thought patterns they'd like to promote, that'd be fine too. If they're on the other side of the planet, then it's likely the interview might be pre-recorded. And also we might occasionally, when it's allowed, drop in on other groups to see what their interests are and what they're talking about. Now, as to what it's going to cost for the individual. So without the financial burden of an anchor location and lots of business expenses, initially there'll be no dues. And I'll find funding sources elsewhere. Be it as a sole member LLC, there are no employees, no staff, no major assets. The resources are shared by volunteer participants. As we've often done previously, we don't have a nice telescope with a camera here, but we know you do. Would you like to share what you're currently looking at? So sharing resources. We don't need to own your telescope in order to be able to have you share what you can see through your nice, expensive telescope. Perform local commercial outreach and presentation activities to gain services revenue. If there's any need for major asset funding, there's this thing called crowdsourcing. Some of you might be familiar with it, but as long as what you're trying to get funding for is popular, people will contribute small amounts, and a lot of small amounts adds up to a large amount. So if we really need something and it's expensive, crowdsourcing will be a way of doing that. And as the startup costs are low, sustaining membership dues is initially zero and hopefully will be kept very low. Some funding may have to be steered towards establishing affiliations or memberships in other organizations, and it would be single member membership rather than something I saw in one of the organizations where we'd be happy to have your members be our members, and you can be an affiliate for only a slice of your membership. So they actually want to know how much you charge per member, and they'll take a piece of that action for every one of your members. And like, okay, no. So the idea is to shift the financial burdens from membership to other activities. So how would one work with such an organization that's new and different? Instead of a primary presence being on a worldwide website, which might have lots of pages that cost money and have to be maintained over time, the primary internet presence would be Facebook. Connection to public participation opportunities would be only on Facebook. So if you need the link, that's where you'll find it. And if you follow the page, then you'll get notified as soon as the connection information is available. Hopefully I will grow another thumb and learn how to expediently edit recorded video sessions like this one and post those on a YouTube page. Here's the additional item. While I'm familiar with Google Groups and have set those up, having a Google group that is a discussion topic specific thread Google group will be a little different. So you can ask questions if you see the presentation a year from now. Any documents that have to be passed around will be available through public Google Docs. If you're not familiar with Google Docs, that's cloud-based storage of files. As always, there'll be an email address where you can ask questions or get directly involved. I'm more than willing to just go, oh, you want this, and then give you a link to point you somewhere. I'm looking at any membership management is being done through the Astronomical Society of the Pacific and their NASA Night Sky Network affiliation. They seem to have member management services there that don't really cost much. And anyone that needs to learn the baseline information of what is being done, they can visit the World Wide Web site through a Google search or Facebook and get the 411, so to speak. Okay. Go from first steps to next steps. Establish the LLC. I've already paid the state of Florida. They have already taken my money. They just haven't registered it yet. So once it gets registered, then I can officially say what it is, but it's not official yet, so I can't. Once I have the LLC, I can establish a commercial bank account for paying for things, and I can inject some founder funding. Create a recognizable logo that can be used as a service mark and a tagline, and don't go through a marketing organization to do that. So zero marketing service costs. Start to establish a worldwide presence: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Gmail, Google Groups, and Google Drive. Establish what would amount to a single page World Wide Web presence with the appropriate search engine optimization tags. Find it as first on a Google search kind of thing. But I know those tags, and I won't be spending money to do that. Maybe take this video and provide it as a public introduction, and then link from the website and from Facebook to the YouTube site to do that. I know how to internationally promote things using zero cost services, but organic growth or word of mouth or who you know or who's seen something and pass along the experience. I went from 0 to 15 people being invited this evening. So I think there's opportunity to grow. Establish an awareness with governmental bodies at the county, state, federal, and international level, not necessarily so that use permits can be obtained. Not planning dark site treks or use of a government facility at this point. So use permits are not currently in the future. The one thing I am considering is later this year, the Big Cypress National Preserve's annual 4 months worth of stargazing sessions, and how an organization like this would be allowed to participate in it, bring telescopes and look up. How to promote to local and virtual commercial services. There are talent groups that specialize in doing this sort of thing. And I've turned down, for a number of reasons, many opportunities, usually with hotels and restaurants, because they wanted far more than willing to provide on a recurring basis, and a lot more control over what is being done. So that'll be negotiable. And identify our first noteworthy guest speaker. That ain't me. But I can tell you some people I did talk to. So this is a list of organizations that once I have the official LLC registered, I'll be reaching out to. Some of these you may know about. Some of these you may not be aware of kind of who their parent is. So if you think about the, for example, the Kitt Peak Observatory in Arizona, they're a member of AURA. AURA is the Association of Universities for Research in Astronomy, but even they have a parent, the U.S. National Science Foundation, the NSF. So, everybody has someone they have to get funding from or look up to. And so if you can work from the top down, you can more likely get a leg in than if you start at the trenchmost level and try and work your way up until you can get someone's interest. And also, it won't be just astronomy groups or facilities or organizations reaching out to. I know some people that work in other organizations and other, let's just say, research fountains of information that we can draw upon. So we might not always be talking about astronomy, but it might be a related subject. For those people that are familiar with some of the quantum technologies, things like, oh, how does an MRI work? How does a CT scan work? What is the positron in a PET scanner? Isn't that antimatter? Delve into some other tangential things. And I know I have to look over here occasionally, spinning more plates. And yes, I am familiar with the Khan Academy and some of their educational sessions. So I will make note of that. And add that to my list and see what we can draw from there. So I've reserved the right to do this because a friend invited me. I have a friend in medical device standards. He used to work at GE. He's a Caltech PhD graduate, and he's an alumnus. And one of the benefits you get by being a Caltech PhD alum is that you can attend their presentations and you can invite one other. And you can invite, your better half, and that's not considered the other. So I was invited as his plus one to today's sessions. And that was wonderful. For those familiar with Andrea Ghez, I've actually now been on a presentation where she was the speaker in a live session. And she discussed black holes and her work with the Keck telescope in Hawaii. So that was kind of fun to be actually listening to and submitting questions to a Nobel laureate. So that was fun. And then the second discussion that I was in, which is kind of why things were a little delayed today, was on extraterrestrials and the kind of hurdles that they would have to go through in order to exist. And the panel discussion was led by that recognizable Pluto planet killer known as Mike Brown. So again, listening to them live discuss things and follow-up questions afterwards, that was a joy. So hopefully we'll get to do those things in the future. Unfortunately, I was not permitted to share the link, although I did ask, but it did share some screenshots that I took on the side with Helen. So not just to make her green with envy or jealous, but look what I did. So. Okay, as I really don't like the presenter followed by Q&A, and nobody's been saying anything. For those unfamiliar with it, I will now say, let me open the floor for discussion and questions. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, now I've got to say.
Okay, I have a question.
I've got to say, is this mic working? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Question is, it's okay. Sometimes it's hard to ask a question because you don't know exactly the words. My question has to do with, it sounds like you're setting up like I don't know today's terminology because we have so many different kinds of things. I don't know if it's an organization that you're talking about, or it sounds like you're doing some kind of formal structure to a new process which you're developing now, which I don't know if you have given it a name or just Monroe's meeting, because that's how I've been calling it right now is, are you going to go to Monroe's meeting? And I don't know if you're doing that because, sometimes in our day and age, we need to do legal things to make sure that we protect ourselves from things coming about. Or if you're doing, I understand that you're saying that there'll be some kind of fee maybe in the future because you're looking at it as not being a nonprofit, but a profit. Maybe, I don't know. I don't follow it completely, but it sounds like something I would want to listen to that part of.
Okay, let me clear things up here. Yes, I am forming a limited liability corporation. It has been filed with the state of Florida. They have not officially registered it yet, therefore I can't identify it, but let's just say it's in process. The reason for doing so is, not everything has zero cost for operation. Sometimes you have to pay for things like domain names and website hosting and things like that. And it is better to not use your personal bank account for those kind of things on a recurring basis. It's better to create a source of funding and then pay for those things through that source of funding. As you know, right now we're not going to be doing any face-to-face astronomy observing outreach. The potential for physical liability is nil. So liability insurance is not currently something that's in the expected budget, but eventually, if we do enough public things and we want to do an event or a presentation, they may say, oh, well, you need $1 million of liability coverage because our governmental agency requires it of all those that interact with us. And so you need a business structure for that. But it need not be a nonprofit. It can be a for-profit, which is kind of like with the IRS and the state, you kind of got to go one way or the other. And if you're a nonprofit, there's an expectation that you have an elected board that holds regular board meetings, and that can change the flavor of things over time to maybe something that is counterproductive to the original approach. And that's kind of what I ran into last time is a nonprofit that the leadership changed and wanted to do things differently. And that wasn't my cup of tea. So
the being not a for-profit gives you more flexibility. It would seem like that would be the other way around in a way,
No, actually, it's the state of Florida has. If you've ever done business, there is a thing called a sole proprietorship. That's where a person starts a small business. They actually have employees, and they operate it that way. It's quicker to start up one of those, and all the revenue folds into their personal revenue. So there's no real separation of funding. So this isn't a sole proprietorship. This is a sole member LLC. An LLC has the liability protections of a regular corporation. It does not sell stock, so it's not a Class C corporation.
Right.
And it's not a nonprofit, it's for-profit. So it doesn't have to respond to a fixed set of bylaws or a regularly elected administrative board of directors. I guess the way is saying is there are more constraints on how you can operate financially, but there are far fewer constraints on how you can operate organizationally. So we'll try this way.
Is that, Joanna, you done? I'd like to say some stuff. I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to say a couple of things and ask a couple of things. I was only out in the beginning for about 5 minutes, so I'm not sure if I missed what I might wind up asking about. I have to commend you. Not that I would never think you could be capable of this. You put a lot of thought and work into this, and I know what that's like to a degree because I've tried to start some businesses myself, and I admire the entrepreneurial aspect of this. Okay, I forgot what I was going to say. Well, I'm going to compliment you. Okay, I'll just jump to the questions then. You covered a lot of ground. Yeah, maybe in a way it wasn't what it's even more than some people were expecting here, but it is to be admired. But did I happen to miss, if you go back to towards the beginning when I was out of the room, anything? Because you're talking about I gather, website, and like I was even thinking before I even heard the rest of your presentation, I would agree. I'm guessing, I could be wrong, that you personally are paying for the Zoom time tonight yourself?
Yes, but the Zoom time is $15 a month.
Oh, that's it?
So it's
Really?
entirely tolerable.
Okay, I thought it was by the, event.
It's not,
Okay.
it is not, there are other organizations like WebEx and GoToMeeting and things like that, if they're large enough, they charge by the person, and they can even charge by the minute. Zoom is, as the saying goes, cheap to keep.
Okay, that
If
was good.
anybody can establish a Zoom account personally, and so long as you keep the sessions to 40 minutes or less, and the total participation to 100 participants or less, and you don't expect any cloud storage for your recordings, essentially Zoom is free.
Well, what happens? Go ahead.
I go to the next step. I actually have a number of companies that I'm kind of the leader of. One of them is called Practical Health Interoperability LLC. It's where I do my medical device standards work. And that's under my personal email address, even though you see the business name PHI LLC. It's me, it's my business, it's my email address. So I just piggybacked onto that for this session. But once the LLC is established, you'll see a Zoom account specific to that. I'd like to tell you the name, but I can't just yet.
Well, this is over 40 minutes, so you would have to pay extra if
No,
not.
no. If you have a free account, then it's 40 minutes.
Oh.
If you pay the $15 a month like I do for this Zoom account, then it's unlimited time.
Oh, okay.
So I am not paying anything extra. I pay a $15 a month flat fee for whatever duration I want, anytime I want to set up a session,
Really?
and up to 100 participants, which I don't see us getting to 100 soon. I would be happy when that occurred, but
well, then here's part two. I don't want. Okay, well, that was good to know. I learned something for sure tonight with that. Okay, so are you implying again about a website very quickly? Because it's supposed to be free, some of them, I thought. Or very
that's the interesting thing is the cost for the domain name, the whatever.com, that's fairly cheap. If I pay, this is weird, if I pay annually, it's $10 a year. Okay, I can cover that. So I bought a couple of domain names off the same route. And once the LLC is registered, you'll see those. The hosting, if you host what they refer to as a boilerplate, a canned front page with maybe a few links on it to like Facebook, that's also cheap to keep. And as long as you pay for it a full year in advance, it's really cheap. So if you understand how things work in today's technological society, everybody should be entitled to a soapbox. And once you learn about them, everybody can have a soapbox.
You're
Which,
right.
which is, the next step beyond there is, what about all these people that you never heard of before having podcasts? Well, they'll have them on sites that don't cost anything to offer up their podcast, because while you're watching the podcast, over on the right side, you'll see ads.
Yeah, they're all commercials. I
Right.
know.
But
I'm on.
but you can still watch the podcast. And if you adjust your screen just right, and you have two displays, you can actually slide the window over and you don't see the ads.
And also on YouTube, you can, within a matter of seconds, I let you say skip ads, because I'm on it all the time.
Yeah.
I'm on YouTube.
Yes.
Skip ads, yeah.
Yes. Sometimes you can skip the ads.
Just don't make money from it is the point. They make less money from it. People want to monetize what they call money.
No. Whenever you see an ad that you can skip after 5 seconds, they paid a lot less for that ad. The ads where they paid a lot of money for, your program will start or continue after this ad.
Well,
And those ads are typically limited to 30 seconds or 15 seconds, depending upon how much they paid for the ad. So understanding how
Right.
things work on a starship is
Right.
helpful.
Well, I have seen where you can't get out of it, and if it's something I don't like, yes, it bothers me. I'm on YouTube a lot. The thing, I'm glad you mentioned Facebook, because I forgot. That's one thing I wanted to bring up. For me, this is not done for me, but just as an example, I'm sure I'm the only one listening to this right now who has no use for Facebook. I have a use for Facebook. Let me restate that, but I cannot say the language I want to use here in public about what I feel about them now. They did me very dirty. Twitter's doing the same thing, but not as bad as Facebook. And I have no use for Zuckerberg. So were you saying that you were only going to be initially on Facebook? That's what I might have thought I heard.
No. The videos that get recorded will be played back through YouTube, not through Facebook.
Oh, you will use it.
Very good.
Yeah. I prefer YouTube for the pre-recorded videos.
Yeah.
For the live videos, they'll be on Zoom. The link will be posted through Facebook. Although I have email addresses, I'd like to not clutter up people's inbox, but once I go public with the opportunities to participate, I need a vehicle for doing that. And,
Well, that's what. I was going to say, YouTube, I was going to bring up, why can't you go right to having this whole, well, even what we're doing tonight, for example, well, up the road on YouTube, it's free. I don't understand.
Actually, it's not. If you do YouTube live and you want to do it for a certain audience for a certain duration, then YouTube Professional comes in. So there is a fee for hosting certain things. There is a flat fee for Zoom. So the live sessions will be on Zoom. The recorded sessions will be posted on YouTube. People forget that Facebook is just today's pin, sort of push pin into things.
Yeah.
There were things that were social media before Facebook ever came into being. And I think that in the longer term, if Facebook doesn't, as the saying goes, clean up their act,
Yes.
it's not impossible for another organization to come in and steal their thunder. So I will use Facebook minimally as a means of announcement. I don't plan on doing the live sessions through Facebook. I don't plan on posting the recorded sessions where you view them on Facebook, but it's a more contemporary means for providing links to things on the internet than forcing people over to a website that is rarely updated.
So she's so.
I have a question.
Sure.
Are you saying that you're not going to be sending out an email each week to invite us to the meeting? We'll have to go to Facebook. I don't like Facebook, but that's just my opinion. I've never liked it. I've never been on it, except for when I have to go. And so,
So one of the problems we had with the prior sessions was there were as many as 3+ things that showed up in everybody's inbox simply because I wanted to make sure I got all the audience that expected to receive the notification. So if I want the general public, Facebook is unfortunately the place that I would have to say.
Yeah,
And
right.
here's the link for tonight. But if you would prefer that I only communicate and expect you to get it via email, then I will add a column to my spreadsheet that says basically prefers email.
Oh,
I'll
Yeah, I
still-
think email is a good idea, I think.
I will still
I would
post-
like it.
I will still post on Facebook for the general
Yeah.
public.
Yes, I
Then
understand.
the next
that.
thing to ask is, would you mind joining a Google group? If you remember, the prior organization had 3 different Google groups, one for members, one for imagers, and one for radio astronomers. And there will be multiple Google groups associated with this activity. Instead of me having to manually send out, an email that blind carbon copies everyone like I did today, because not everyone appreciates their email address being handed out to a list of strangers, maybe. I could send out solicitations to the email list that would say, you're invited to join the Google group once the LLC is available. And you could join there. That way it's pretty easy for me to send out an invite on the Google group. Now, if you prefer to get it through Facebook, you don't have to join the Google group, but you can still go look at the Google group. So it's a matter of, we'll start at a stake in the ground and we'll adjust things accordingly as the need arises. So, okay, I will add a column to the email list and say, these people would prefer an email. And once the Google group is established after the LLC is registered, then we'll look at using the Google group for those email notifications of the sessions.
I'm on Google, but I never heard about the group. So I have to look into how you access all that.
All you would have to do is when you get an email from me that says, would you like to join the Google group? You just click on an accept and you'll then be a part of the Google group. You do not have to go read things from the Google group. If there's a posting, you'll receive in your inbox an email saying, hey, this has just been posted to the Google group, and it'll contain the hyperlink information to go to the Zoom session. So it will appear very familiar if you've participated in the prior sessions.
I didn't know they had, actually the first time hearing that they had a Google group. One other thing you mentioned that I heard you say very at the beginning before it all started today, basically, you're setting up that you were going to record this. I hear you say that?
If you look at the participants list and you have to click on a button that says, show me the participants list.
Yeah, I've done that a few times.
We currently have 10 participants, including myself, and there's a little red bullseye next to me that says I'm recording.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
And you can feel free to be on mute whenever you want to. You certainly are not required to have a camera or even a microphone for that matter. If you want to sort of partake of this watching podcast style, that's fine. Not everybody's comfortable with the same level of participation, and I get that.
But you're saying as of everything that's happened so far since you began this night, it's recorded. It is recorded. But what kind of, where would you see it beyond when it's over? Where would you get it up again? How would you get it up again?
It would be on a YouTube site.
Oh, it will be. All right.
Yeah, once the LLC is done, and I will go back and edit some of the junk out of this and any personal information kind of thing. And now your names are showing up there as participants, but if you don't want to include your last name, you can see that Diane is just Diane, and that's fine.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah.
You don't need your full name. So for this session, I will likely try and find a way to blot out some of that personal information. Also, you'll see that everyone is listed as guest. That identifies your formal association with the with the Zoom session. Zoom sessions can have registered participants. None of you are registered participants. If you know enough about Zoom, if I wanted to charge for participation in these sessions, then I would opt for registered participants. I'm not, but should I want to, let's say, hold a presentation and discussion at some private business organization, the local Rotary group, so to speak. If I did that and I was going to charge them money, then I would likely look at a registered participant model, which would mean if you're a guest, you can't live participate. And if you want to participate, you have to be registered, which means you paid a fee to be there.
Right.
So there are avenues for doing this that will provide sources of funding. I have in the chat window that I haven't answered yet. Can we help out with a GoFundMe? No, not at this time. The GoFundMe approach would be if, let's say, I wanted to buy something expensive that we needed in order to do this one notch better, then I would go that approach. I did that years ago for my Cisco WebEx sessions. So I hopefully am well illuminated. I have a ring light. I have a 4K camera. I also have a courtroom stenographer's microphone, which is why you don't see me sort of speaking into one of those spit mask kind of things.
I was wondering what you were using for a microphone. It sounds very good.
Yes.
Yes.
If you've
Excellent.
ever participated in a legal transcription where you're sitting in a room with somebody who's taking dictation electronically, this is the kind of microphone they use. Strangely enough, it's only $50 and it plugs into your normal microphone input on your computer and requires no extra hardware.